Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima 'allamtana. Ameen. So today we're going to be talking about the importance of selflessness, which is the opposite of selfishness, about the rights of family and relatives and the responsibilities that we have towards them, and about the rights of the husband and wife between each other. So, selflessness. The Prophet ﷺ said, طَعَامُ الْوَاحِدِ يَكْفِي الْإِثْنَيْنِ وَطَعَامُ الْإِثْنَيْنِ يَكْفِي الْأَرْبَعَةِ. Food for one person is enough for two, and food for two is enough for four. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying that whenever there's going to be food that's present for one person, it's actually sufficient to feed two people. And whenever there's food for two people, it's actually enough to feed four people. So, and the formula goes on and on and on, right? 4 for 8, and there's other ahadith which talk about 4 for 8 and all of that. So, what does that mean? Right? The Prophet ﷺ is saying, طَعَامُ الْوَاحِدِ يَكْفِي, meaning it's sufficient or it's enough for two people. So food for one person is enough for two people. What does it mean to be enough for? Well, it means that the average quantity that people eat or should eat is sufficient. Right? Now that makes a big difference in delineating and specifying how much you're actually eating in the first place. Right? It makes a difference, and we kind of talked about the hadith about the third and all of that. So that's going to make a difference in terms of how much you're eating. What the Prophet ﷺ is actually trying to say is that the average quantity that the normal person would eat or would need to eat could actually be split in half, and it could be shared by other people. Even if you take a small meal, which normally would have been sufficient for you healthy, but it wouldn't fill you up. Even if you split that in half, that would still allow another person to eat, and you get half of that, you would still survive. Meaning it would be sufficient. You wouldn't become malnourished or anything like that. Then he says, now the thing is, why is the Prophet ﷺ saying this? Many people can take different lessons out of this hadith, right? One of the lessons is that you need to stop eating so much. So if you say, for example, food for one is actually sufficient for two, meaning don't eat so much. That could be a lesson. It means that maybe we're eating two big servings. So, have a serving size. If you go to a restaurant today, what do you find? You find that the average plate in like a upper class restaurant or something, especially if it's like, Mexican cuisine or something like that, it's huge. It's like a giant plate. It's usually, if you actually calculate the amount of servings, from like the medical perspective, it's like 3 or 4 servings per plate. And you're expected that each and every single person orders an entire plate of like, 3 burritos or whatever the type of food is, right? It's a big serving. Now, that could be a lesson that's being derived, but primarily, the Prophet ﷺ was trying to emphasize one point. And those are other good lessons, but the main thing he's trying to emphasize is you should invite other people to share your food with you. So see, sometimes when you read the hadith, you can think, okay, maybe it has this lesson, maybe it has this lesson. What was one of the main intentions that the Prophet actually had when he was saying it? He was trying to say that, look, if you have food for one person, and if it's enough for two people, what should you do? You should go and invite somebody else to go and share this food with you, so that you're not only eating yourself, you're actually helping feed somebody else. That's a major lesson, and it's a very important lesson. And then, the other lesson we can derive as well, on top of that, is you only need a little bit of food to stay healthy. So if that would have been sufficient, if half your meal was sufficient for you, then you don't always need to eat so much, so don't be concerned. And this is one of the reasons why people don't like to share their food with others. You'll find some cultures which are very selfless, and some cultures which are very selfish. Some cultures which are very selfless, we won't start describing the cultures, right? We won't say which one is which, because it depends on the people. But some cultures are so selfless, they're always offering so much food to other people, and you find, for example, in a social gathering, that the host will always be the last person to eat. And even if food runs out completely, it's not a problem. And if some other people who are uninvited guests come in, What will they do? No, 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 come. Everyone is welcome, no problem. Some people walking outside, let's say you booked in a hotel room and you see them walking outside, why don't you just come and join us anyways as well? The people who are serving you food in the social gathering, why don't you, once you're done serving, why don't you come and, enjoy some food as well? There are some cultures which are like that. Very selfless, trying to invite everyone else, come, everyone eat. And there are some cultures which are very selfish in nature. I'll just give you an example from my own life. That, without going too much into detail, I was on the bowling team, okay? And every week we used to, be in the bowling lanes. And there were some people who were on my team members, right? And I would go and I would get money from my parents and I would order, a bunch of food and cheese sticks, all the junk food and all of that stuff. Share it with the entire team because that's the way that I was taught. Everyone is there, everyone's allowed to eat, everyone's allowed to get whatever they want. As much as they want, no problem, we'll just go order more, no problem. Because alhamdulillah, I was given the money to do that. Then there was one guy on the team. This guy, even if he bought like a tiny little thing, tiny little piece of candy or whatever it is, he would sneak it and he would go and eat himself. Everyone else is getting the point, we're sharing. This is the only guy who comes and he's only eating himself and he's hiding in it. We find him every time he's eating the same thing. It was milk duds or something like that, right? He's going and eating, but he's hiding and he's like, so that no one else sees him. And then he would go and he would offer to like one of his friends or something, and to other people, he just kind of just pretends like he didn't see them and everything like that. Very, very selfish. This is not the characteristic of a true believer. A true believer is selfless. Why? Because they understand that, 3 milk duds could actually be sufficient for you, whereas the other 3 could be shared with somebody else, right? You would get a sufficient amount of pleasure just by eating a few of them. So this is something that you find different cultures. But what our goal is, adjust our culture to make sure it's fitting in line with Islam. So if our culture is a very selfish one, where we're not sharing, we have to take this hadith and give it priority in our life and try and make an adjustment and modification within our own culture. If we're already coming from a generous culture, alhamdulillah, we think, where did some of that get reinforced? It got reinforced through Islam. So when people say, wow, this culture is so amazing, they're so generous, they're so nice, well, what's one of the reasons behind it? Because Islam came to reinforce that in certain statements, like this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So it doesn't mention. So the thing is, the scholars have explained that, and they've classified this hadith under, categories and chapters which explain about sharing to other people. And the thing is, if you think about it as well, right? Dieting and like overeating was not a common problem. It was a common problem among wealthy people. Like today, we're always talking about diet and calories and carbs and should you not eat carbs and South Beach diet and Atkins diet and all of that stuff. They weren't living in that kind of context. Being a little bit heavy was something actually praiseworthy. Like you're not supposed to be like a skinny person really in that community. It was not praised. Here it's like all about skinny and skinny jeans and things which perhaps can invalidate your prayer and all of these type of things. So different society, completely. We'll cover that in fiqh inshallah. So completely different society. So that's why we should not only apply what we think that this means based upon our society back then, and the scholars explained it as well. So it gives us insight, inshallah. Any other questions? Okay. The Prophet ﷺ said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. The Prophet ﷺ said, none of you has true faith until he desires for his brother what he wants for himself. Okay? None of you has true faith until he desires for his brother until he wants for himself. So we talked about brothers already. Brother can mean brother, sister in Islam, all of that. Now when the Prophet ﷺ says you, لا يؤمن أحدكم, none of you truly believes. This is something you'll find throughout many ahadith, many statements of the Prophet ﷺ. None of you has true faith. Who is you referring to? Yeah, believers, right? Because who's the Prophet ﷺ talking to? He's talking to the companions. When we read this, it doesn't mean that it's confined only to the companions particularly, unless the context seems to indicate that it's confined to this specific person. So whenever it says you and it's in the plural, it's talking about you believers, meaning you Muslims, right? So none of you truly believes until they have, none of you has true faith. So what is true faith? Okay, literally the word was yu'minu, which means none of you believes. Yu'minu, none of you truly believes. We saw this, right, in other hadith, right? So none of you truly believes, meaning none of you has complete faith. Your faith is not complete, it's not firm, it's not grounded. The point of this hadith was what? The point of using this style, we already talked about it, who remembers? What was the point of using this kind of style? Is it to show that if someone's not doing this, then they're not a believer anymore? No. Okay. What is the point of it then? Emphasizing, exactly. Emphasizing the point that if you want to be a true believer and if you have true faith, this will manifest itself in your character, in your being. Okay? Now let's look at the rest. Until you want, desires for his brother what he wants for himself, right? You want or you desire for what you want for your brother as well. What is it that you want? What is it referring to? It's referring to every single thing that's good. Anything that could be labeled as good is something that you would want for yourself. Everyone wants good for themselves and they want to keep bad away from themselves. Right? This is a general principle, right? Now the thing is, we have to look at it from two perspectives. There's good in this world and there's good in the next world, right? So if we're talking about good in this world and good in the next world, what is good in this world? If you want to be happy in this world, you should also want that the other person be happy, right? And you know that phrase, misery loves company, right? So if you're miserable one day and you decide, you know what, I'm going to pass this misery on to somebody else. Are you practicing this hadith? No. Are you being a true believer in this sense? No. So you don't go and mess up somebody else's day because your day got messed up. Why? Because what would you want? You would want your day to be nice. You would want to be happy. So whatever you want, even in this world, you would want it for somebody else. Now the problem with things in this world, as we've discussed before, is that when it comes to physical objects that you may want, they're limited, right? If you want to have the latest and greatest technology equipment that comes out, right? It doesn't mean that every single person in a society is going to be able to afford it. Not everyone can afford the brand new, Galaxy S4 or whatever when it comes out or something like that. They're not going to be able to afford it. Why? Because there's going to be a group of people who are producing certain parts of it. Their wages will be obviously lower unless you consider communism to be an ideal, which in Islam we don't. There's an aspect of social welfare, but communism is not an actual ideal. It's not actually something that's going to exist within society because there's other variables and other things at play in terms of effort that people put in. It's not fair that one person is working, one person is not working, and they go ahead and share the same money across the board. And I'm not focusing on extreme capitalism either, where that person had no opportunity to also do this. So the thing is, it's not an ideal in Islam. So in reality, there will be people who will have access to more resources for whatever reasons, and there are people who don't have access to certain of those resources. Now, if everyone wants the same thing, the resources are limited in this world. They cannot be spread out completely among everybody. So what ends up happening? That there's going to be times where certain people can't have certain things. You may have things that you possess where you cannot give this to every single Muslim in the world. You don't have the possibility to do so. Maybe they would want it, but you're not able to give it to them. So what do you do in that case? In that case, your desire will be sufficient. You're wanting and wishing that that person could have something similar without you necessarily giving it up would be sufficient to fulfill the meaning of this hadith. Does that make sense? So for example, let's say this clicker, right? This very nice clicker, mashallah. We spent a lot of money on it. Alhamdulillah, we got it, and it has a timer on it, and it has a nice battery meter, and it has a laser pointer, and all of that stuff. Now, how many can every single person who ever delivers some PowerPoint or some presentation in the world, will they be able to afford this type of thing? No, because of the cost involved, because of the shipping things, because of availability in the community and all of that. But if I really believe that, you know what, I wish every person, every Muslim who's teaching and delivering a class and trying to do a very nice class, I wish they had this quality of pointer. I really do. That's loving for your brother what you want, what you love for yourself. But you know that not every single person would be able to get this. And there are other people who have a much better clicker than me. They have like some kind of, I don't know, customized to their hand maybe. You know, the person molded it with their hand and it's like $1,000 custom made in Italy or something like that. Right? We're not going to get that because it would just be ridiculous to do so. But there are other reasons why we're not going to get that. Right? But maybe that person says, you know, it would be nice, I wish everyone else could have it. So the point is, things in this dunya, things in this world are limited and restricted because the amount of resources are not there. But as long as you would actually legitimately, sincerely want that the other person had this great thing as well, in terms of material benefit, even though they cannot get it, you will fulfill the obligation of this hadith. The second thing is the hereafter. So when it comes to the akhirah, when it comes to the next life, what do people want in the next life? Jannah. They want paradise, right? So how do you get paradise? You get paradise by believing the right things and by doing the right things. So that means that number one, if you're racking up good deeds, you also want your brother or your sister to be racking up good deeds. But there's another aspect to it. We go back to the word brother and we look at what some of the scholars say. Imam al-San'ani is one of the scholars who explains this hadith, and he says, whenever brother is being mentioned, it not only implies sister, but it also implies non-Muslims as well, as long as the context is not specific to Muslims only. So when it comes to the afterlife, if we want paradise, then we also would like our non-Muslim, brothers and sisters in humanity to also get paradise. Which means what? Which means, what is one of the prerequisites for them to also get paradise? To believe, to be given the message of Islam. So if you actually want for your non-Muslim brother and sister in humanity to also be given paradise, then what do you need to share with them? The message of Islam, right? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm telling you a very true story. We were at a protest for Palestine one day at a university campus. And the people who were organizing the protest, they were letting the people know who were there and setting up setting up the boards and setting up the flyers and everything. And they said clearly, and I'm quoting to you, I'm quoting exactly what they said. And this was an activist leader, mashallah, very, very good person, but giving the wrong message. And they say, remember, we are not here to give them the message of Islam. We're only here to utilize them, to use them to help liberate the people of Palestine. And don't mistake that. Can you imagine that statement? Okay, does that really make sense? Based upon what we're understanding about Islam, this is completely wrong. How can you say that we're here to use somebody? The actual word was use. It wasn't even utilized. We're here to use them to help liberate the people of Palestine, not to give them the message of Islam. SubhanAllah, what kind of Islam is that? This is ridiculous. So this was a really, really big mistake. So I want to make it very clear that when we love Islam and we love Jannah for ourselves, we should also love it for other people. And we have a responsibility to convey the message of Islam to those other people. Limited to being possessed by only a few. So we talked about this material, not limited to being possessed by only a few, meaning that it's something that there's limited resources in this world. Okay? Any questions on this hadith? Yes, very good question. How do we reach that point? How do we get to that point? Well, the first thing is to realize that we're all servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And the thing is that when it comes to things of the akhirah, Allah does not restrict any good deeds. We talked about good deeds just multiply. Allah can reward anyone. So from that perspective, it's very easy. If we just remember that, look, I don't need to take away somebody else's good deeds in order for me to also benefit. That works fine. When it comes to things of this dunya, that's why I said, when it comes to material possessions not being able to spread around, even if you necessarily don't want the other person won't be able to get it, you don't have to give it up. You should want it for them. Why? Because you should think that, look, this other person deserves the same level of contentment or happiness that I would like to have as well. That's something that, if you remember that your life will not be ruined, your life will not be destroyed if you actually want that other person to have it. If you realize that you don't have to give up your thing that's in your possession and give it to them necessarily in order for them to have it as well, then why are you getting upset at somebody else? So if you understand the logic behind it and the wisdom that you don't need to give something up necessarily always in order for them to have it as well, then you should have no problem with it. That means you just love other people to be in a state of misery or something like that. So that's something that you need to work on your heart. You need to realize that, why am I being so selfish? Why do I only care about the things myself? And how do I, get rid of that? There's a lot of things you can do. One of them is to start giving in charity slowly. One of them is to actually experience how other people feel who have less than you, who don't have these kind of blessings. When you experience how they feel, you live with them, you see what they're going through, you start to soften up a little bit. These are some of the things, and more things, inshallah, we will cover in detail in the purification class, inshallah, purification of the heart class. Yeah. وَالسَّابِقُونَ How do you race each other in good deeds? Right? How do you compete? فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ compete with one another for good deeds. Right? When you compete for good deeds, it doesn't mean that you're trying to not let the other person get ahead of you. Competing for good deeds simply means it's like a competition where you're trying to motivate the other person and the other person is trying to motivate you by moving forward as well. That's what it means, competition. Competition in good deeds is never about how can I take theirs and get all of them, because good deeds don't work that way. So when it comes to good deeds, it's more about racing together, and someone's going to move forward a little bit and you say, I need to beat them a little bit as well. When you're beating them, you're not beating them because you don't want them to win. You're beating them because it's motivating you to go more, and they'll also get motivated to go more as well. That's what the correct mentality will be. So it's not worldly competition. So competing for good deeds is not about winning. Right? It's about, in the end of the day, if you look in the back of your mind, or you look at the real intention behind it, it's to actually have more good deeds. And you want the same thing for the other person. So that should be the intention. It should never be just to win. That should never be the real intention, inshallah. Good question. Okay, let's continue, inshallah. Selflessness. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir فليكرم ضيفه جائزته يوم وليلة والضيافة 3 أيام فما بعد ذلك فهو صدقة ولا يحل له أن يثوي عنده حتى يحرجه. So the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever believes in Allah and the last day should honor his guest. His right is special treatment for a day and a night. General hospitality is for 3 days, and what is beyond that is charity for him. It is not lawful to stay with him so long that he inconveniences him. So what is he saying? He's saying that whoever believes in Allah and the last day, meaning a sign of a true believer, should honor his guest. Okay, honoring your guest meaning taking care of your guest. His right, meaning the right of the guest, is what? Now we're talking about specifically what is the right of a guest. Special treatment for 1 day and 1 night. Your hospitality for a day and a night, but a special form of hospitality. General hospitality is for 3 days. Not 3 additional days, meaning a total of 3 days. Right? Including that first day was already included. And what is beyond that, if you continue to give hospitality beyond 3 days, that is a charity for the person who's giving the hospitality. It is not lawful to stay with him, meaning it's not lawful for the guest to stay with the host for such a long period that host is being inconvenienced by the first person. So this is very important. So the first thing we understand is, whoever believes in Allah and the last day. Belief in Allah implied that if you're a true believer in Allah, you do this, emphasizing the point. Why? We've already seen, you don't truly believe unless you do this or unless you do this. Why is the last day being mentioned here? Why al-akhirah? I think we had discussed this before, right? Why not whoever believes in Allah and believes in the angels? Right? Accountability. Why not whoever believes in Allah and believes in Prophet David, Prophet Dawood? It could have chosen anything. Why al-akhirah? Al-akhirah represents accountability. So meaning that if you believe in Allah truly, you're a true believer, and you remember that you're going to be held responsible for what you do, then you're going to be more concerned about doing this action which you should be doing. So what is it? To honor your guest. Okay, ikram al-dayf. Taking care and being hospitable to a person who's your guest. Right? So how does a person become a guest, first of all? Right, somebody who just kind of shows up at your doorstep or something like that. It's someone who's in need of hospitality, or someone who's coming from afar, and you take that person and you invite them and say, I'm going to show you hospitality. So what is this actually saying? It means reach out to people who have the potential to be your guest. Reach out to them and invite them and show them hospitality. That's an amazing thing in Islam. You should show them people hospitality if you do that. So we covered this already, Allah in the last day, summary of fundamental beliefs. Honoring means going out of your way to take care of your guest. Honoring your guest. Meaning showing, what's the word? I just lost it. Hospitality. Right? Showing hospitality. Why do people not show hospitality? Especially in this society, there's generally less hospitality than you will find in other societies. What are some of the reasons? Raise your hand. Yes. Selfish. Why are you selfish? What's it going to cost you? It's going to cost you time. Money. It's going to cost you money. You have to buy an extra plate of biryani or something like that. You have to add some more rice in there. Extra burger or whatever it is, right? Costs money. It's time. You got to work, right? You got stuff to do. You have to work overtime. You have to watch, your TV shows. You have to, respond to all your Twitters and Facebook, messages that you have. You have to make sure that, you go and, just sit on a reclining chair for 30 minutes, just doze around. You're a busy person, right? You don't have time for these kind of things. So what are you sacrificing? You're sacrificing your time. You're sacrificing your money. And what else? Your effort. You have to go and put effort, and you have to move. You have to maybe cook the food or something like that. So showing this, you have to say nice words. Maybe you have to smile a little bit. This is all effort. So this hadith is talking about you should go out of your way to show hospitality to guests, because it's a characteristic of someone who truly believes in Allah and truly believes in the last day, because they know that they're going to be held accountable. Allah is going to reward them for doing this. And Allah is going to hold them accountable if they never do this, if they're not interested in doing this at all. So then he said, so honor your guest. His right, so the right of a guest now. So if someone's in need of hospitality, or let's say a family member of yours comes over to visit, they have a right now. Their right upon you is to get special treatment for one day and one night. Okay? What is special treatment? Special treatment is that extra special hospitality, right? And sometimes guests, they demand a certain standard of hospitality. So if you go and you cook, right, like falafel or something, and they're like, this was ridiculous. I came to visit them, and all they could cook is this. Where's the 6 hour long that it takes 6 hours to marinate and cook that maqluba that was supposed to be? You should have started preparing 3 days in advance that I was coming. So people complain. That's the special treatment. So it's saying that their right is special treatment, not to the exaggerated level that they may demand, right? But you go out of your way. So if your normal diet, if your normal food that you're eating, okay, I'm better with American food. So let's say your normal standard of eating is you're eating pizza every day, which you shouldn't be eating anyways, every day. But you're eating like pizza and a burger or something. That's your normal standard of food. You raise it one notch. You don't go in the first day that they come and you say, you know what? You go and you tell your family, come on, let's cook something special. No, they can eat everything that we eat. We're used to eating this every day. They're going to eat the same food, not on day one. Not on day one. So in day one, special treatment. They get the extra food cooked. They get all of that stuff, done. They get little special service, some fruit juice along with, some yogurt drink, whatever it is, right? That's day one. Special treatment, you get, the bed nicely made for you and the bathroom is set up and make it very nice. As nice as you can make it, inshallah. That's special treatment. Special food, special shelter, throw an extra pillow in there or something like that. I don't know what people do with all the pillows on their bed anyways. But hotels, they have like 6 pillows or 7 pillows or something like that. Whatever they're used for. You can throw it on there to make it look nice, right? Now, he says, general hospitality is for 3 days. Meaning the other 2 days are going to be general, meaning beyond that. So the general meaning hospitality as a whole is for 3 days. It lasts for 3 days. The first day was special, but it lasts totally for 3 days. The other 2 days does not have to be special anymore. It does not have to be that this guest is coming and they're saying, well, we're coming for a week. And you go home and you tell the wife, every single day I want to see, caviar on the table. Well, caviar doesn't take time to prepare. I want to see that special dish, the one that you have to start before Fajr, cooking. I want to see that, and I want to see that, the tea. I want to see the milk boiling for 12 hours so that, the tea goes inside of it. Proper, doodh patti, strong, tea or something like that. That's not required every day. That's day one. Day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, you're back to normal now. You're just general hospitality, very nice and everything. Everyone's going fine. Now they don't impose. The first day you do special treatment. Someone can complain, oh, you could have done a little bit better here. Maybe they have some right perhaps. Second day, they have no right to complain. There's no issue going on. Then he said, general hospitality is 3 days. What is beyond that is charity. So anything you do beyond the 3 days, that's sadaqah. If you can do that, alhamdulillah. You want to take care of the other person, great. If you don't want to take care of them, say, you know what? It's time for you to go to your other uncle's house. Right? I'm your uncle, yes. But I'm not the only uncle in Southern California. It's time for you to transfer over to the other uncle. You can do that. And it's fine. If you want to keep them longer, that's sadaqah for you. That's sadaqah for you. But you don't need to hold them to the exact same kind of standard that you were holding them to before. Then it says, beyond more than 3 days. Right? Meaning that that's a reward. Right? You'll get rewarded for that, but it's not a right. So the actual right is 3 days of hospitality. Then you can ask them to leave. And they should do what? It's not lawful to stay with him. It's not lawful for that person to stay with you for such a long time that you're inconveniencing the other person. Do not inconvenience the person. And that's very important because sometimes guests, they take advantage of their hosts. And they think that we're here and we brought our bags and we're going to be going to Disneyland and here and there and we're staying 3 weeks. You have to ask for permission whether you're allowed to and try not to inconvenience your person who's hosting, because they have to go to work, they have to live their life. If you're expecting all of this, it's very difficult for them. So Islam has brought a balance here. Take care of guests, but don't go all the way extreme where you're not taking care of them, and don't go all the way extreme where your entire life is ruined, and you don't want to ever take care of a guest in your life ever again after this type of guest. You're not going to have to do that. So this is a very good balance to make sure that nobody gets overburdened in any way. The guest does not get overburdened because they're getting hospitality, and the host does not get overburdened because they're not ruining their entire life and in their entire schedule. Inshallah, any questions? I just translated the word وَالضِّيَافَةُ ثَلَاثَةُ أَيَّامٍ. Diyafa means just like hospitality. I just added the word general in there to kind of make a difference between special and general. So it means hospitality is for 3 days. Okay, focus on hospitality is for 3 days, but then you back up and say, well, before that he said, but special treatment is for 1 day. So the 1 day is included within that span of 3 days. Meaning, if you don't have any hospitality towards guests, you can be held accountable. And held accountable doesn't always mean that it's negative. Meaning you'll be held accountable, you'll be rewarded by all the hospitality that you gave to other people. And if nobody is giving hospitality to anyone, then yes, you'll be punished. If some guests keep coming all the time, say, no, I'm not going to keep them. So how about you? No, I'm not going to keep them either. You go stay in a hotel somewhere, you're going to be held accountable because we have a right. Now, it depends what kind of guests, how close they are to you. Could someone else have taken them? Is it so inconveniencing to you that they happen to come without telling you and you're working that day? And they say, well, I came to visit Disneyland and you're not going to take off time for me? Okay, that's not very fair. So there's a balance. But if they come on a Saturday, let's say they're your relatives, for example, then why not? If they're a good friend of yours, they're coming from out of town, and they say, we're coming in town. You say, well, maybe we'll see each other at the masjid or something. No, give them hospitality. It's nice. If you can. If your schedule can permit, or you can free up some time. If you're so busy that you absolutely have no time, then it's a different situation. But someone has time to give them hospitality. Today, hotels have become more common. Even people prefer to stay in a hotel for their own convenience sometimes, right? So that's allowed, but generally means we have to be a hospital in some way. You don't have to keep them in your house overnight. Invite them for dinner. Take them out for dinner if you don't have time. Take them to like a burger or something like that, even if you don't have time. Worst case scenario, just buy them a burger and give it to them or something like that. It's still hospitality, right? Worst case scenario, just say I'm gonna have someone drop a burger off to you. That's it, khalas, it's done. You hospitality, alhamdulillah. So that's the important thing. Okay. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Man kana ma'ahu fadlu dhahrin, فَلْيَعُدْ بِهِ عَلَى مَنْ لَا ظَهْرَ لَهُ وَمَنْ كَانَ لَهُ فَضْلٌ مِّنْ زَادٍ فَلْيَعُدْ بِهِ عَلَى مَنْ لَا زَادَ لَهُ." So the Prophet ﷺ said, during a journey, the Prophet said, so this is actually a narration. During a journey, the Prophet ﷺ said, anyone who has a spare vehicle should give it to someone who doesn't have a vehicle to ride. Anyone who has extra food should give it to someone who doesn't have any food. Very simple, very basic. Now what does it mean? What is a spare vehicle? At that time they were traveling through the desert with camels, with donkeys, with mules, with horses, with different transportation. Generally what ended up happening at that time is that if they were traveling mainly with camels, or even with horses or whatever, they would take turns because not everyone had a camel to ride because the camel was quite big. So some people will be walking, some people will be riding on their camel. It's a lot easier obviously riding on an animal than walking the entire distance through the desert. So what ended up happening was some people had extra camels with them. They had a camel which is carrying their luggage, another camel which is carrying some other stuff. They had some extra camel or whatever it is. So there are people who owned like 3 or 4 camels and they were traveling with them. And there were some people who didn't have a single camel and they're walking. So this is how the army used to be during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So it was very difficult for people, especially during some expeditions, like expedition of Tabuk for example. Traveling from Medina all the way up to northern Arabia is very hard, very long, especially when they were traveling in the summertime. Very difficult journey, very tiring, very hard. So now if somebody else had a camel that they were not using, the Prophet ﷺ was on a journey and he said, anyone who has a spare vehicle, it's not being used, someone else can sit on it, should give it to someone who doesn't have a vehicle to ride. So give it to the other person. So it means that if you have a spare vehicle, what does a spare vehicle mean? It means you don't need it right now. It means that it's excess. You're not utilizing it right now. Give it to somebody else so that they can go ahead and utilize it. Because how much harm would you incur? Nothing. The camel's going to go and eat something anyways on the ground or whatever. You're not really losing anything. Even if you had to feed the camel some of your own food or something, it's not a big deal. So he's saying, you have a spare camel. What should you do? Give it to somebody who does not have an extra camel or vehicle to ride. What are you doing when you give that to somebody else? Number one, you're appreciating that blessing that Allah has given you. Not only did He give you one, He gave you more than one. He gave you 2 or 3 or 4, and the other person doesn't even have one. So you have something above and beyond, which is a blessing from Allah. You appreciate that blessing not only by thanking Allah, but also by going and sharing that blessing with somebody else. Number 2, you help another person with a small sacrifice. Now here's the interesting thing. How much are you sacrificing when you go and help the other person? What amount of effort is actually involved? And just take a look at the example that we're using in the Prophet ﷺ's time and look at the example we're using in our time. Let's say you have a spare car and it's just sitting there and it's not being used. And you know someone else who doesn't have a car, and they need that car, they're riding their bicycle to work. Okay? Not out of choice. Like some people, mashallah, but they're riding it to work because they have to, because they don't have a vehicle. What should they do in that case? What should you do? If you give them the car, okay, let's say you can either pay for their gas expense or you can make sure that they pay for their own gas expense. Say, you can have the vehicle, but you have to fill the gas yourself. How much are you losing if they fill the gas themselves? Nothing. You're putting mileage on the car, right? Putting mileage on that car is going to depreciate the value a little bit. But the car was sitting there anyways, it wasn't really doing much. Assuming that there's not so much wear and tear, there's a little bit of mileage going down and everything, you can rent the vehicle to somebody else for a very, very cheap value just to cover your cost. During the time of the Prophet ﷺ, if you give somebody a camel to ride, the camel does not have an odometer on it, right? The mileage is not going, the camel is not going to get weaker. In fact, the camel might just get stronger over time. Not in that particular journey, but over time. It's like exercise for the camel. The camel, you don't just keep them, in your house or something. They need to be moving around. If they don't move around, they're not getting exercise, they can't travel as well. So you're actually not losing anything by giving the camel up to somebody else at all. And the food generally, this is on a journey. You're just giving it to them while you're on the journey. You're not giving it to them permanently. You're giving it to them for a temporary period of time. So what you're losing is really not much. It's a very, very tiny sacrifice. If any sacrifice at all. The point is to not be selfish and not to hoard, for yourself. Now it comes to food. Food is a little bit more difficult because you're sacrificing more than if you just gave somebody your camel to ride. He says, anyone who has extra food should give it to someone who doesn't have any food. First thing is, what does this tell you about the situation of the Muslims at that time? They were traveling. Okay, the Prophet ﷺ is on a journey. He's traveling with Muslims. And that means that there were Muslims who were traveling in the middle of a journey and there were people who had no food to eat. The Prophet ﷺ noticed that other people have extra food. What did he do? Did he go and force them and grab the food away from them and say, no, this food is going to be distributed equally across the board? He didn't do that. He could have done that. He didn't do it because it wasn't that dire, but the other people were hungry. They were not dying. If they were dying, he would have done that. They were not dying, but they needed some extra food. So what did he do? He advised, he said, whoever has some extra food, go ahead and share it. Why? Extra food means that this person brought more food on the journey and somebody else's food ran out. If you share the food and it's extra, you're still going to be fine. When you get to your destination, everyone's going to have food. So why not sacrifice a little bit? Again, it's a very temporary sacrifice, and that amount of food is what you actually need for yourself. So we can survive with less amount of food than we actually, crave all the time. So this is something about selflessness, that don't hoard and don't be selfish, especially when you're not sacrificing much. But you will find people, or you'll find sometimes maybe yourself, even though you're not sacrificing really anything, you go ahead and you say, no, I'm going to do it anyways. Even on small things, you'll notice yourself. Say someone's trying to go and grab that chair to sit down in. You run over there and you say, I'm going to go sit in that chair first. How much did you sacrifice by getting to sit in the nice chair? Right? Did you lose, was it that comfortable perhaps? Or if someone, there's a slice of pizza left and there's a donut. And I'm using bad food examples here, but there's a pile of kale left over here, and there's some carrot sticks over here, okay? And you go and you run and you grab the one that you want real quickly so the other person couldn't get it first. How much did you really benefit? I mean, if you ate the carrot sticks, would you really have missed out on the, whatever the other food was? Would it make that big of a difference? No, right? So get yourself into the habit of trying to put other people first, especially when you're not going to be sacrificing greatly. And that's the importance of being selfless. And that's what the Prophet is trying to teach us. Any questions on this? Good question. So is it right? Should you be sharing to such a point that you have nothing left for yourself at all? No, the thing is, If you did that, it would be a nice thing, but generally you don't need to. That's why we talked about food for one is enough for two. So you can survive, if you're on a journey and you have, one granola bar, right, and you're hiking. You can split the granola bar in half and you'll probably survive. You'll probably be okay for the hike, right? If you have one canteen full of water and someone else, they lost their water. They were hiking and one guy's canteen fell off and he lost it and it fell down in a ditch somewhere. He can't get it. You say, well, that's your fault. Your canteen fell, my canteen's still fine. Losers weep or whatever you want to, say. You don't do that. As a Muslim, you say, okay, no problem. I'll share with you and we'll go ahead and we'll drink half and we'll be fine. We're not going to survive. I mean, if you're going to die, then you probably all end up, the guy will probably attack you anyways. It's not going to make a difference. You'll probably be in trouble anyway, so it's not going to really matter. Inshallah. Next hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا مَاتَ الْإِنسَانُ انْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إلا من ثلاث صدقة جارية وعلم ينتفع به وولد صالح يدعو له. When the son of Adam dies, all his actions cease except for three: a continuous charity, knowledge which others benefit from, or a righteous child who makes supplication for him. Now, what does this mean? Right? First of all, the son of Adam. When the son of Adam dies, the son of Adam refers to, right? Actually, this is a wrong translation. There's two hadiths with the same terminology. The word that was used in this is insan. I actually replaced it with a different Arabic text. So, son of Adam is actually not in this hadith. Insan meaning any human being. Any person. But if you ever find the word son of Adam being used, it means any person as well. Okay? So this hadith has two narrations. It's the same hadith. One person narrated with Ibn Adam and one person narrated with Insan. So I took the other one. I don't recall why. Don't remember why. Probably it was too cold in the UK and I just, flipped it for some reason. All right? So any type of person, when they die, all their actions cease. That we understand, right? Meaning, there's no good or bad deeds for them anymore. Once you die, it's over. Your book of deeds are going to be closed. There's nothing else that you can get because you can't do any action. You can't go and give charity. You can't pray anymore. You can't do anything. It says all these actions cease to benefit him or perhaps even harm him, except three things. Okay? Three things. Now, what does three things mean? The number three, remember we talked about, was it in this class, about if you have engineering, you have a very technical background, or you have like a social background. If you have a very technical background, you'd always think three is three. It's limited, and that's the number, it's never going to be more. Three doesn't mean only these three. Three means that these are some examples that you can use to apply analogy as well. So there are other things that fall in the similar category, which will also count as a continuous charity, but they just weren't mentioned. These are just three examples here. Number one, sadaqatun jariyah, and this is a very commonly used Arabic term. Sadaqa jariyah. Sadaqa means charity. Jariyah means ongoing, continuous. Something that just keeps on benefiting other people. And if it keeps on benefiting other people, it's going to also benefit you, because it's still benefiting other people. So continuous charity, some examples of them are, for example, if you build a building which other people are going to benefit from. Like if you help build a mosque where people are going to be praying in. As long as they continue to pray in it, you still get some of that reward because you helped build it. If you dig a well that people are going to benefit from, and they're going to keep drawing water out of it, especially if they're in a poor country or something, every time they're drawing out water, you're going to be getting reward for that thing as well. So it's like they say, the common statement, if you feed a person a fish, you fed them for a day. If you teach them how to fish, you fed them for their life. Same thing. So if you want to get the best charity, if you're able to donate some money or some type of charity, try to focus on at least some or more continuous charities, because you want to get the maximum reward, right? Everyone wants to maximize their reward as much as possible. Try to invest in continuous charities. Like, for example, you can donate to the people of Africa X amount of dollars. But if you can go and use that X amount of dollars to go and build a well there instead, it's going to be a continuous charity because they keep on benefiting from it again and again and again. And that remains with you even after you die. That's what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. Even though your deeds are over, because this continuous charity continue to benefit people, you will continue to get that benefit in terms of good deeds, even though you're already dead, even though your life is over, because people are benefiting. Number 2, عِلْمٌ يُنْتَفَعُ بِهِ, knowledge which other people benefit from. Now, why knowledge, and why is it considered to be... See, continuous charity was, sadaqah jariyah was the general rule. These are 2 more examples of what a continuous charity is. So what is a continuous charity? Charity kind of focus more on the material aspect. Now we're still looking at a subcategory of a continuous charity, that is knowledge. Why is knowledge considered to be a continuous charity? Because when you teach somebody something, and that's beneficial, they go and act upon it, and it keeps on benefiting. Or if they keep on teaching, you keep getting the reward back. Pay it forward type of mentality. So you keep getting that as well. That's why, I'll remind you one more time, inshallah, when you read these hadith and the things that you learn in class, go share them with your family, right? So that they benefit, and so that I benefit as well, inshallah. So that's something that actually is good. And you will benefit when they go teach somebody else and they practice upon it. Number 3, وَوَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُو لَهُ, a righteous child who makes supplication for him. So we were actually having a nice debate about this this morning. Is that, what's the best thing to do if somebody passes away? What do you do for your family, for your parents and everything? Should you start praying extra prayers for them and saying, this prayer is going to be on behalf of my father, or this Hajj is going to be on behalf of my father. I'm going to go for Hajj every year, and I'm going to make the intention that this Hajj, transfers over to them and something like that. Some scholars said that, inshallah, if you do some things like that, inshallah, maybe they'll transfer over if you read Quran for them or something like that. Outside of that issue, that's an issue we'll cover in theology next quarter. But outside of that, the best thing you could do, and the best thing that you should do for your parents or for whoever it is that helped raise you, your uncle who taught you or whatever it is to pray for them. The best thing. Ask Allah to forgive them. Ask Allah to grant them paradise. Ask Allah to grant them Jannah and all of these things. Now here's the thing. If that's going to be the continuous charity, when is that going to work? It's going to work when that child has been trained to appreciate what you have, to supplicate for you out of the love that they have and the thankfulness that they've had, everything that you've been given. Right? So the benefits are due to the righteous status of the child and the fact that they're motivated and inclined to supplicate for you. If you raise a child that's super selfish, right? And the only thing they're interested in is wealth. The only thing they're interested in is money. The only thing they're interested in is your reputation or whatever it is. And this is becoming a big problem. Because parents are always complaining, all my kids think about is money. All they care about is money, and they're waiting for me to die so they can take my inheritance. Becoming a very common problem in American society. Well, why is that? Because you train them that way. You train them to love wealth so much because you loved it so much yourself. What did you expect from them? So if you train them that way and you say, well, now I'm going to tell you, before I die, I'm going to transfer all this inheritance to you, but I want you to pray for me. You better pray for me. Do you think the guy's going to pray? Number one, are they really going to do it? No. They want your money. Number two, if they did pray for you, what status do they have in the eyes of Allah if they're so materialistic in the first place? So it's like going and asking like the worst criminal, he's Muslim, criminal and murderer and president of some country, and he's murdering people or something like that, left and right. You say, you know what, I want to choose this person, please make dua for me. And the guy releases like another bomb on a village or something. Can you make dua for me? How ridiculous would that be to go to that person, right? All the people you could have gone to, you went to that person. So you think that, oh, you know what? If I have a child, more children, they're all going to pray for me. They're only going to pray for you if you teach them that praying is important. If you teach them that these things actually have some value. If you don't teach them, what do you think you're going to get? You're not going to get anything back. Maybe they'll even curse you. Maybe they'll pray against you even. You don't know. So you have to be very, very careful about these things. All right, that's, where is it? So supplication. So you supplicate, so the importance of training good children is actually in this hadith. We're going to talk more about children's rights and all of that. But one of the things that children have a right to is to be trained and to be taught to become salih, to become a righteous person. That's a parent's responsibility. And the parents who keep thinking that, you know what, if my child becomes righteous, but you had nothing to do with that in the first place, how do you fall into this category? If you had nothing to do with that, but perhaps because of their love for you anyways, they're going to go ahead and supplicate for you. If you do, you're lucky, but that doesn't mean you contributed to it. So parents have a major role to play in this regard, inshallah. Any questions on this? Anyone. I mean, it can be to your students as well. So it's not only to a child. It can be to your students, to your child, to your grandchild. Generally, in this society, children were the ones who were so attached to their parents. And they're the ones who are going to pray the most sincerely for you and, be the most dedicated to you. But sometimes you might have a grandchild. Maybe the child is not working out, but the grandchild is so attached to you. The grandchild will fall in the same category. Yes, of course. Inshallah, of course. Why not? As long as someone who's so... See, the whole point of saying child is because if you raise the children correctly, who's going to be the one who cares about you the most? Your friends will make dua for you once in a while, right? Your acquaintances will make dua for you, once a year maybe or something like that. Who's going to care for you the most? It's your own children, if you raise them correctly. So if it's not the children, if they're not there, then your grandchildren, if you raise them that way. No? Like if someone was like the Prophet ﷺ, who did he make the most dua for that he wished he would become Muslim? His uncle. Because of how much care he gave him, how much he took care of him. Even though he didn't accept Islam, he was making dua while he was alive because of the attachment that's there. So it's about attachment. It's not just about parent and child, it's about attachment. Opposite is also true, yes. If you establish a casino and you don't take steps to, try and demolish it, before your life is over, then yes, you're going to be held responsible for every person who's gambling in there. So it passes on both ways. Both ways. May Allah protect us. As long as you had the opportunity to fix it somehow. Inna ala abi laysu bi awliya'i. Innama waliyya Allahu wa salihul mu'minin walakin lahum rahimun abulluha bibalaha. So the Prophet ﷺ said, the members of my father's family are not my supporters. My supporters, my true supporters, are Allah and the virtuous believers. However, they do have family relations with me, and I will be dutiful to them. So now, this is about the rights of family and about the rights of relatives and all of that. So what is the Prophet ﷺ saying? First of all, he said, the members of my father's family are not my awliya. They're not my supporters, right? Or they're not my supporters. So the word is wali, awliya, meaning friends, supporters, allies, people who are very, very close to you. So what he's saying is that the people who are the members of my father's family. So in the tribal society, the father's family was considered to be the one who's closest to you, over and taking precedence over the mother's side of the family. That's the way lineage kind of worked at that time. So he's saying, my family members are not my real supporters, meaning they're not the closest people to me. So what is he doing? He's redefining things. The normal definition is, the people who are closest to you are your family. And he's saying, the people who are closest to me are not my family. See how things are being redefined? So he's saying, the people who are closest to me should be my family, but they're not my family. Who are the people who are closest to me? My supporters, my true awliya, my real people who are close to me are Allah and the virtuous believers. Allah and the virtuous believers. So the closest one to me, number one priority in my life is not just family, it's Allah comes first. Who's number two? The righteous believers. Salihul mu'mineen. Right? Virtuous believers is very interesting to note. He didn't just say mu'mineen. He didn't just say the believers. He said the righteous believers. The righteous among the believers. So it's not just any old Muslim or any old person who's just kind of there. The closest people to the Prophet ﷺ, or the closest people who should be to you, in your heart at least, are the true believers who are real servants of Allah. The ones who are doing what they should be doing. The ones who are truly following Islam. Not just Muslim by name. They have a status as well, but there's some special connection between the people who are virtuous and the people who are righteous. So he's saying, my real supporters, the real people who are close to me, are going to be the true believers, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the true believers. But here's the catch. Here's the except part. He says, however, they do have family relations with me, and I will be dutiful to them. I will fulfill their rights and their responsibilities. Who is he talking about? From his family, most of them or all of them were salihul mu'mineen. They were righteous believers. We're talking about non-Muslims, right? Many members of his family were not Muslims. So what is he saying? This is what you call balance. We always talk about Muslims are getting off balance this way, or they're getting off balance that way. This is balance. Number one is, my family is not number one in my life. Allah is number one. Number two are the righteous believers. If the righteous believers are in my family, they're even closer to me. But if they're not, then they're not number one priority in my life. But at the same time, I'm not going to go and say, my family has nothing to do with me because you're kuffar. You're out of here. No. The real balance is that I must still fulfill my family obligations regardless of how bad they are. I don't care how bad my family is. In the end of the day, they're still my family. They're not the closest. They're not my awliya. They're not like the closest in my heart. But I have obligation towards them, and I'm going to fulfill that. So the difference here is that when it comes to Islam, when people enter into Islam, they still have their family with them. If their family doesn't follow, or their family is not righteous, or their family doesn't want to practice Islam, how do you treat your family? You treat them in a way that, number one, realizing that, okay, they may not be at the same wavelength as you. But your obligation towards them has to still be fulfilled. So Islam came to do what? It came to make a shift in priorities, but it did not come to break the attention away from one person to their own family. Does that make sense about the difference? Because a lot of people think either one of two things. The two extremes are, one, family takes precedence over Islam no matter what. Extreme number one. Extreme number two, Islam is the only thing that matters, and when Islam comes, if the family doesn't come into Islam, family's out. I have nothing to do with them anymore. They have no value and no meaning whatsoever. And the balance is in between the two of them. That's what this hadith is talking about. So it's trying to redefine the concept of tribalism, redefine the concept of family, so that it's based upon close connection with Allah and the believers, while not neglecting the family at the same time. That's balance. Any questions on that? Yeah. No. So like the example that she's giving is that there's a family, they're practicing Islam, and one of the daughters decided, no, I'm not going to wear hijab, or I'm not going to practice this part of Islam, or something like that. And so they kicked her out on the street, and she was jumped by some people, she was beat up, and she was put in a hospital, and life in danger and everything. No, you're not allowed to just kick somebody out. So it's still a family member. Your job is to take care of them, whether or not they're practicing. As long as you're not giving them, you're supposed to take care of them anyway. If you're giving them money, and they're spending that money on drugs, that's a different case. But in terms of taking care of them and maintaining family relations, that's absolute must. That doesn't break with Islam or without Islam, or disobedience of Islam or something like that. That's not going to break. That should never be taken away. Even if it's older, even if your daughter or your son is 35, okay, and they become a criminal, okay, they become a criminal. Your job is to help them stop their crime. Right? Let's say they become a drunk, okay? They start drinking, okay? Your job is to help them with their drinking, to help them stop somehow. If they're coming drunk home in your house or something like that, your job is to protect your house as well, while trying to get them in a rehab program or something, get out of whatever it is, right? If they're drinking casually and they're not putting their life in danger, let's say, you're going against Islam, kicking them out is not going to solve anything, right? It's going to get them, like she was saying, it's the same example. They're going to start hanging around with worse people, worse company, and they're just going to get worse and worse and worse. Rather, if you're not justifying their action by keeping them in the house. By showing them family love, you're not justifying what they're doing. You're telling them every single day clearly, we don't agree with what you're doing. We want you to stop, but they're not listening. You say, well, you know what, at the end of the day, we're still going to be here. We're going to have a meal together. We're going to hope that, we're going to keep praying for you. We're going to hope that you change. But kicking them out is not something that you do. A girl married another guy and he's not Muslim. So you want to kick it's your daughter, for example. You're talking about the parents? Yes. The parents have a responsibility. Even though what she's doing is against Islam, the parents should maintain a relationship with them, with the hopes that when something goes wrong in their marriage, right? When something goes wrong, who's she going to turn to? She's going to turn back to her family. If you leave an open door, you leave a lifeline there, she'll be willing to come back. If you don't leave that door and you close the door and you say, you're not welcome here again, when something messes up in that marriage, who's she going to go to now? Well, I don't have family because they don't want me. I'm going to go to somebody else who's going to mess me up even more. That's why the door should always be left open. Family relationship must be maintained. The only point where you're disowning is if someone is openly insulting and mocking Islam and making fun of the Prophet and coming home with drugs and all of that, something that's really above and beyond that state. If they're doing something that's a personal harm to themselves or personal violation of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us, then that's a personal thing. If they're committing a societal harm and they're stealing and they're this and they're that and you're holding a criminal in your house and you're protecting them from the police, that's a different situation. Right? So generally, if they're doing something that is against Islam, you still maintain, you don't cut off contact with them. Right? That's not what you do. That's just it doesn't solve anything. You make it clear. You don't condone what they're doing either, but you don't cut off contact with them. If I had a sister, which I don't, if I had a sister and she was drunk, she was drinking, and she was sleeping around with a bunch of guys and everything, what benefit would it do for me? Right? If I go and say, I don't ever want to talk to you again. Don't message me, don't call me, I don't want to see your face at all, nothing. No, I'm going to say openly, you know how I feel towards this. You know you're going to be held responsible in front of Allah. You should stop doing this, but I know you don't want to stop, but I have a feeling I'm praying for you, and when you're ready, I'm going to be there. Whenever you feel that, you've had enough of this lifestyle. You said, I'm tired of this lifestyle. The people around me are superficial. I'm tired of, getting drunk in a bar and some guy taking advantage of me and everything. My door is open. You come and talk to me. And it's going to happen where she's going to come back, and that's going to be better to her coming back to Islam than me saying, I don't want to talk to you. Because that's just you putting your own frustration out. There's no benefit in that, really. Unless it's a very extreme case. Very extreme case. Okay, so this sheikh is saying that someone who doesn't pray, you're not allowed to eat with them. I don't know where that's coming from. I don't know of the details. Don't know where he came up with that, but I'm hoping that there was some context to what he was saying. Maybe he was trying to say that, if you boycott eating with them, maybe they'll reconsider their own life and they'll start praying a little bit or something like that. Perhaps that could have been his technique. I'm just trying to give benefit of doubt to this person. But generally, no, you shouldn't do that. If someone doesn't pray, not eating with them is not going to make a difference. You go and you eat with people who worship idols. You can't eat with the guy who's praying. And if he's not praying and he believes that he's not praying, there's something wrong with his Islam anyways. But not eating with him is not going to make a difference. So, khair, Allah knows better. Okay, I'm glad you asked this question. So, you're fasting in the month of Ramadan, your family doesn't want you to fast, and they say whatever your mother puts on the table, you have to eat that in front of you. That's not a duty, right? It's not a duty that you have to eat every single thing that your mom puts in front of you. So fulfilling your duty doesn't mean that you're doing everything they tell you to do. So if they say stand on one foot, you have to stand on one foot. That's not a duty. Duty means you're respecting them. You're saying, you know what, Mom, let me explain to you. You know that I'm a Muslim. You know that I'm trying to fast. This is a very important month. It's our obligation. We have to do this. This is something that I have to do. So treating them respectfully, trying to visit them, trying to maintain contact with them, those are duties. Okay, there's a difference between like 100% doing everything they say and fulfilling the duty. Okay, it's a very good question, by the way. Is he writing the questions for you, or you actually wrote it yourself? You wrote it, mashallah. Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. All right, we'll get afterwards, John. Okay, inshallah. Let's continue with the hadith. So, okay, we'll stop because these hadiths are getting very long. So we'll stop reading them and we'll just go ahead with the English. So somebody said, Messenger of Allah, I have some relatives with whom I maintain relations, but they cut me off. So I maintain a relationship with them, but they're cutting me off. They don't want to talk to me. They don't want to have anything to do with me. I'm good to them and they're bad to me. And he says, I am forbearing to them and they're impatient towards me. So this guy is doing everything he can and they're doing the exact opposite. He said, meaning the Prophet ﷺ said, if you are as you claim, then they are going to be bearing the sin of their deeds. So if what you're describing is true, they're going to have to get the sin of what they're doing, and you will continue to have a helper from Allah against them as long as you continue to do so. Continue to do what? You keep on doing these things, and Allah will help you in some way that will keep you patient and help you keep doing these things, and you'll get reward and they'll get sin. So let's look at the hadith. Literally the hadith actually says that you're throwing hot ashes on them. You're going to keep on this thing. It means you're throwing ashes on them. You're fueling the fire, right? So, but the actual meaning is that you're going to continue. They're going to keep having the sins of what they're getting, right? And you continue to have a helper. So don't worry about the literal meaning of the hadith. Sometimes translated literally, throwing hot ashes is not. It's not something that most people can relate to. So you don't always have to go into the literal meaning. That's important because when you're translating hadith, sometimes it's very important not to always go into the literal meaning. And especially if you're giving khutbahs, you're giving a public lecture or something, and you say, if you're in front of an average Muslim audience, and you say, well, you start, translating a verse of the Quran, and it says, if you turn on your heels, then this is going to happen. Now, if people never read translation of the Quran, how many of you know what turning on your heels means? You see, less than 50%, less than 80% of the audience. Turning back on your heels means that you're turning around and you're like fleeing from the battle or you're getting out or something like that. So don't always use the literal, explain the actual meaning of things. Sometimes when you see a literal translation, give people the meaning behind the hadith rather than just the literal thing and leave it there. So this is a guy, okay, let's look at this. This is a guy who's coming to the Messenger of Allah. And he's saying, "Oh Messenger of Allah, I have relatives. I'm being good to them. I'm trying to talk to them. I'm trying to sit down with them and have a conversation. I'm trying to have dinner with them. I'm trying to have breakfast with them. I'm trying everything I can do to maintain good relationship, but these people hate me. I'm being good to them, they're bad to me. They curse me, they insult me, they make fun of me, they call me names. They say, we don't have time for you. Everything, I'm trying my best to get through to them, and they're going and they're doing bad to me. I'm forbearing, I'm even being patient, and they're impatient with me. They don't want to, nothing. Everything I do is a problem. I'm trying my best, but they just hate me." So what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Think about what he could have said. He could have said that, you know what, man, forget these people. Who has time for get rid of them, man? These people don't deserve your attention. You're, mashallah, such a great guy. Just get rid of them, man. Go deal with some other people. But these are not friends, right? If these were your friends and they're treating you this way, get rid of them. They're not your friends. Get away. This is your family. Meaning you can't just abandon your family because the blood ties don't just go away. You have to maintain relationship with them, even though they're treating you horribly. So the Prophet ﷺ tells him, so this guy's being cut off, meaning I'm cut off for no good reason. Right? They don't want to see me, they don't want to talk to me or everything like that. The Prophet ﷺ says, if you are as you claim to be. Now this is really, really important. Just look at the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, he could have said, Subhanallah, this is so bad what's happening. I can't believe people are doing this to you. You know what? Inshallah, Allah is going to help you. He could have said that, but he didn't. He said, if you are as you claim. What does this mean? It means that he's not accepting the guy's one-sided story. When you're counseling somebody, this is very important. If you ever, somebody comes to you for advice, right? And they say, I have a family problem. You know, my family's doing this and they're doing this. And I tell them this and they said this. And you say, SubhanAllah, what a horrible, horrible family. I can't believe they're doing these kind of things to you. Did you hear the other side of the story? No. Oftentimes when you hear the other side of the story, whoa, man, that guy was twisting everything around. He was the actual one at fault. This happens so much, but we don't listen to both sides of the story. The Prophet ﷺ is teaching us, I mean, indirectly, he knew that you have to hear both sides of the story if you're trying to actually give an answer about a particular situation. But there are times where you don't have the opportunity, or you don't have the time, or you don't have the ability to go and find the other side of the story, and that's the case here. The Prophet ﷺ doesn't have the time to go and say, okay, you know what, let's go and investigate. I'm going to talk to your family and talk to that member and talk to that member and see what happened, and we're going to go through a nice 6-hour counseling session to figure out what's going on with you. Instead, he said, look, if you're as you claim to be, if this is what's really happening between you guys, he's not accepting one story, he's establishing a very important rule here. If you are as you claim to be, then they are bearing the sin of their deeds. Meaning, you're throwing your ashes onto them. Meaning, they're going to keep on burning. They're going to keep on getting bad deeds. So you don't need to worry that sometimes it's not the best of things, but sometimes if someone is wronging you, somebody's oppressing you, you want justice. And if you can't get justice in this world, then what gives you like some kind of satisfaction or some kind of tranquility in your heart is that at least you know this person's going to get something in the akhirah. There's going to be justice in the afterlife. So that's the thing. They're getting the sin of their deeds. So don't think that Allah is not watching what they're doing. Everything that they're doing, Allah is watching and He's recording, and they're going to be responsible for this. Don't worry about that. That brings some satisfaction, some tranquility to people. And it says, you will continue to have a helper from Allah against them as long as you continue to do so. As long as you continue to do what? So what is the Prophet telling him? You keep on doing what you're doing. Keep on saying, you know what? Let's try and, let's have dinner tomorrow night. No, we don't want to talk to you. Okay. How about we have breakfast next Sunday? I don't want to see your face. Okay, fine. That's fine. Do you want to, go maybe, for, somewhere outside somewhere? And they're going to keep on making fun of you and say, you know what, I don't actually do that. I'm not kissing the ground. Actually, I'm just putting my forehead on the floor and I'm praying to Allah. Say, no, you're stupid and you're this and all of these things. Just be patient with them and keep on trying to connect with them. But what does that mean? Does that mean that every single day you're just spending all your time trying? No, you can slow it down. You can take a break, once in a while. You can go and spend time with your friends a little bit. Try to reach out to them again, hoping that maybe things will change. But your responsibility with your family is, because they're your family, you try your best to maintain connections with them. Okay? Any questions on this? Yeah, and make dua for them. Yeah, of course. And make dua for them. And make dua for yourself as well. Yeah, so it's not something specific that we know. In some way, Allah is going to help you in some way to deal with all of these difficulties. So you'll continue to have a helper from Allah, and you'll keep racking up good deeds because you're trying your best to maintain relations with your family. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that, if it says the guy said they're cutting me off, right? Meaning there's no reason to cut me off, but they're cutting me off anyways. If there was some reason, meaning the guy didn't do anything wrong to them. If he had wronged them and then he got cut off, then you say, well, you know what, they're cutting me off. Well, I did this to them. I stole something from them. It's not Islamically valid, but let's say your family was going to cut you off anyways. This is cutting off with zero reason whatsoever. It's just explaining how bad it is they're treating him. Okay? Yeah. Khair. Inshallah. So we'll take 10-minute break, inshallah. We'll come back at 4:05, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.